Marwan Bishara is Al Jazeera's senior political analyst. He joins us from London. So talking about the escalation, we've had reports, I think it's the first ground contact between Israeli ground forces and Hamas. What do you make of that?
Well, clearly the Israelis were testing the ground, like literally testing the ground, and to see what they're up to. And clearly Hamas was ready for them and definitely, did strike them, as it were, and pushed them or forced them to pull out. I think that probably proves once again why the Israelis have been preparing so hard the past 2 weeks and why they have been bombarding, pounding Gaza the way they have. Because the ongoing bombing is meant to pave the way for land invasion. And the more severe, the more painful, the more persistent, and the more destructive the bombing, the easier it would be for the Israeli military to take on Hamas through a land invasion. The problem here is that the human cost is getting to be so unbearable, that one wonders how many more days, how many more weeks could Israel go on massacring the Palestinians the way it's doing.
And we're hearing hardened rhetoric from Israel's prime minister talking about devastating consequences. And at the same time, we're seeing the US sending troops, hardware into the region. All of these ingredients, they point to the ever-increasing likelihood of this conflict widening.
It does, but it also brings us back to point zero or square one, as it were. I think the main focus of the Netanyahu government and Biden is the Gaza Strip, is the annihilation of Hamas, is the total control of that place and then deciding what to do with it. And everything else is secondary. And in order to do that, in order for Israel to be able to take on Gaza, destroy it, and take on Hamas, it does need the United States to shelter it from any possible ramification in the region, including the possibility of Hezbollah or others joining on a second front. So Israel is trying to scare the Lebanese from taking on any such second front. And certainly the Americans are also doing the same, telling everyone don't, in order to shield Israel. There is, because of that, a chance or a possibility or a danger that this might widen because of the continuous armament buildup by the United States. But once again, I think their main focus is the destruction and the flattening of Gaza.
I know we've spoken about this before, Marwan, but it might be helpful to remind ourselves of the context as well, especially given that another war is going on in Ukraine in which the US has been calling for the end of occupation. Are we seeing at all in the discourse in the US any discussion about pressuring Israel to deal with the root causes, ending occupation, ending siege, ending what international and Israeli human rights groups call apartheid policies by Israel?
Well, thank you for bringing that up, Sami, because sometimes I think even we at Al Jazeera who master the narrative of context, because journalism without context is not journalism, it's just wire service. We in journalism, we have to provide context. Without context, there is no narrative, there is no understanding. There is no possibility to really place what is happening now in its proper historic context. But for the Israelis and the Americans and their other supporters in the West, especially in the Western media, the idea is that history has started on October 7th. Everything prior to October 7th should not be discussed. Even journalists and presenters and anchors are given guidelines not to discuss anything before October 7th, as if that was the day the Earth was created. And that's the problem with much of the discussion that's going on today in the United States and even in Israel. Because as you said, there are root causes for this thing. And it's not like they are cliches or anything. Gaza has been under siege, hermetic siege, for 17 years. It has been occupied for more than 5 decades. What do we mean by occupation? It means the spiritual, mental, psychological, and physical torture of an entire people over so many decades. That's what we mean by occupation. It means the Israeli military dictates who lives and who dies, who starves, who gets medical treatment and who doesn't, who can stay and who can go, who can live and who must then leave. You know, it's just the racism that has been involved over the past so many years, that this possession of the Palestinians so many years is the root cause of this thing. So without us understanding that Israel carried more than 100 bombing campaigns, not one bombing campaigns like what we saw today, bombing campaigns, killing hundreds of people. Over the past 17 years, we don't understand why Gaza is what Gaza is today. So the idea that Israel has had such history of oppression, of military control of another people, a racist apartheid regime, if we dismiss that, if we decide that history starts on October 7, we will never understand what's going on. And we will then lead to more mistakes, more blowbacks, more hubris, leading to even graver situations. I heard before you were discussing it, just briefly, by the way, Sami, I heard you because I heard you discussing the idea of Lindsey Graham and so on. I get the feeling that the Americans think that we live in the 18th century and that the Palestinians are the Indians, the new American Indians. You know, we all love American Indians, but the Palestinians are not American Indians. And this is not the 17th century. And Israel is not America. And the Middle East is not North America. The Palestinians are not going to be annihilated as people. The Palestinian people are going to exist. And Israel, a country of 9-10 million people, needs to exist among 400 million Arabs and over 1 billion Muslims. And it needs to behave. It has to stop with the arrogance. It has to stop with the racism. And it has to stop believing, as a small nation, in a sea of Arabs and Muslims, that it can live only by the sword. It can't. It needs to live by peace and justice. That's the only way it could attain security.
All right, thanks for your thoughts and analysis. Marwan Bishara there.